We need to talk about what just happened behind closed doors in Indianapolis. Because while everyone's been distracted by playoff seedings and all-star selections, the digital breadcrumbs are pointing to something that could completely destroy Caitlin Clark's championship timeline. And it all starts with one explosive prediction from Candace Parker that has the Fever front office in absolute panic mode. I'm Jax Riley, and I've been filtering through the noise all week, connecting dots that mainstream media either missed or deliberately ignored. What I discovered will change how you see Kelsey Mitchell's future in Indianapolis forever. We're talking about a potential betrayal that could leave Clark emotionally devastated and strategically handicapped right as her championship window should be opening. But before we dive into the devastating details, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because this is the kind of insider intelligence that other channels simply won't touch. They're too busy chasing surface-level drama while the real story unfolds in executive offices and agent phone calls. Here's what we're uncovering today. First, the Candace Parker bombshell that sent shockwaves through the Indiana organization. Then, the digital detective work that reveals just how real this threat actually is. And finally, what a Mitchell departure would do to Clark's psyche and the Fever's championship aspirations. Trust me, by the end of this breakdown, you'll understand why sources inside the organization are describing this as their absolute worst nightmare scenario. Let's start with the bomb that Candace Parker dropped that has everyone reading the signals differently now. Okay, now let's get into rumor territory. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the online chatter is too loud to ignore. During a recent media appearance, Candace Parker made a prediction that sent the temperature of the online conversation through the roof. She specifically called out Kelsey Mitchell as a prime candidate to join the Golden State Valkyries in 2026 free agency. Now, Parker isn't some random talking head throwing out hot takes for clicks. She's a former MVP with deep connections throughout the league. When Parker speaks about player movement, executives listen, and her reasoning was terrifyingly logical. Golden State is building something special with their expansion roster. They have cap space, they have championship ambitions, and they need a proven scorer who can create her own shot. Mitchell checks every single box. But here's what makes this prediction so dangerous for Indiana. The Fever have publicly tagged Mitchell as a priority re-sign. Their cap sheet shows $657,000 in space, which should be enough for retention under normal circumstances. But what Parker understands, and what the Fever front office is now terrified about, is that this isn't about money anymore. It's about legacy. It's about being the primary option versus the secondary piece. And that's where things get psychologically complicated for both Mitchell and Clark. Follow the digital breadcrumbs. Here. Mitchell has been Indianapolis's leading scorer for years. She averaged over 18 points per game last season and was the go-to offensive weapon when games got tight. Then, Caitlin Clark arrives, and suddenly, the entire offensive ecosystem shifts. Clark becomes the engine. Mitchell becomes the complementary piece. For some players, that transition is seamless. They embrace the role. They find new ways to impact winning. They buy into the bigger picture. But I've been reading the signals, and Mitchell's body language tells a different story. There's been a subtle shift in her on-court demeanor this season. The way she calls for the ball, the way she reacts to certain play calls, the way she engages during timeouts. It's not dramatic or toxic, but it's noticeable if you know what to look for. And what I'm seeing suggests a player who's still adjusting to not being the primary focus of the offense. That brings us to the inevitable question: what happens when Golden State comes calling with a max offer and the promise of being their featured scorer? But here's what they missed in all the contract: speculation. The real story isn't about money or market dynamics. It's about Caitlin Clark's emotional investment in this partnership and what a Mitchell departure would do to her championship mindset. I've been following Clark's interviews and social media patterns since she entered the league, and there's one thing that stands out. She talks about Mitchell differently than she talks about other teammates. There's a respect there, an acknowledgement of Mitchell's scoring ability and veteran presence that goes beyond typical teammate praise. Clark understands basketball history. She knows that championship point guards need elite scoring partners. Magic had Kareem, then Worthy. Curry has Thompson. And Clark sees Mitchell as that potential championship sidekick, the reliable scoring option who can take pressure off her shoulders when defenses key in on stopping her. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, a different picture emerges. Clark has been actively recruiting Mitchell in subtle ways all season. The way she sets Mitchell up for shots, the way she celebrates Mitchell's big baskets, the way she defers to Mitchell in crucial moments. This isn't just good teammate behavior. This is a superstar trying to make her co-star feel valued and essential. And that emotional investment makes a potential Mitchell departure absolutely devastating on a psychological level. Think about it from Clark's perspective. She left Iowa as the most celebrated college player in history. She could have gone anywhere, played with anyone. But she bought into the Indianapolis vision specifically, because they had pieces like Mitchell already in place. The plan was to build around the Clark-Mitchell backcourt dynamic, with Boston providing interior presence and role players filling in the gaps. Now imagine Clark finding out through media reports that Mitchell is seriously considering Golden State. Imagine the betrayal she'd feel, knowing that all her recruiting efforts and emotional investment meant nothing when a better opportunity presented itself. But the story doesn't end there. Because what happens to Clark's championship timeline if Mitchell actually leaves? I've been filtering through advanced metrics and roster construction data, and the numbers paint a terrifying picture for Indiana if Mitchell walks. This isn't just about losing a scorer. It's about the complete dismantling of their championship infrastructure. Let's break down the basketball reality first. Mitchell isn't just averaging 16.6 points per game this season. She's doing it on 45% field goal shooting and 40% from three-point range. Those are elite efficiency numbers for a high-volume scorer. More importantly, she's proven she can create her own shot when Clark is getting double-teamed or when the offense bogs down. That shot creation ability is irreplaceable in today's WNBA. You can find role players who'll run the system and hit open shots, but players who can consistently generate offense against set defenses? That's superstar territory, and superstars don't grow on trees. If Mitchell leaves for Golden State, Indiana is essentially back to square one in terms of building around Clark. They'd have cap space? Yes, but they'd be competing in a market where every team wants proven scorers, and the available free agents who could theoretically replace Mitchell's production? They're either older, more expensive, or both. But here's the angle nobody's covering: the psychological impact on Clark's game if she feels like she can't keep elite players in Indianapolis. I've been reading the temperature of the online conversation around Clark's leadership style, and there's an emerging narrative that could become toxic if Mitchell leaves. The idea that Clark is difficult to play with, that she dominates the ball too much, that veteran players don't want to sacrifice their games for her system. None of that is necessarily true based on the evidence we have. But perception becomes reality in professional sports, especially when it comes to free agent recruiting. If Mitchell leaves and other players start questioning whether Indianapolis is the right place to chase championships, Clark could find herself in a situation where the franchise can't attract the talent necessary to compete at the highest level. Okay, now let's get into rumor territory that the front office doesn't want circulating. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the signals I'm picking up suggest that Indiana's executives are in full panic mode about the Mitchell situation. The temperature of the online conversation suggests something deeper is happening here than just typical free agency negotiations. I've been connecting the dots through various industry sources, and what emerges is a picture of an organization that realizes they might have miscalculated Mitchell's happiness level. Here's what the other channels won't tell you. The fever. Front office has been quietly reaching out to agents about potential replacement options, which suggests they're not as confident about Mitchell's return as their public statements indicate. We're talking about preliminary discussions with players who could theoretically fill Mitchell's role, even though they've publicly tagged her as a priority re-sign. That kind of contingency planning doesn't happen unless there are legitimate concerns about retention. But there's another layer to this that makes it even more concerning for Clark's future. The trade chatter I've been tracking suggests that Indiana might be forced into desperation moves if Mitchell indicates she's leaving. I've been filtering through NBA insider reports, and there's been speculation about Turner plus a second-round pick for Maisha Hines-Allen, or potential discussions with Gabby Williams's camp. These aren't the moves of a team that's confident in their current roster construction. These are the moves of a team that knows they need to make significant changes to keep their superstar happy. And that brings us to the most troubling aspect of this entire situation. If Clark starts to question whether Indianapolis can build a championship roster around her, how long before she starts exploring her own options? But here's where this story gets really dark for Fever fans, because a Mitchell departure wouldn't just hurt their championship chances in 2026. It could trigger a domino effect that completely destroys their long-term competitiveness. I've been analyzing player movement patterns in the WNBA, and there's a clear trend. When franchise cornerstones start to doubt their organization's commitment to winning, things unravel quickly. We've seen it with other teams when star players felt like management wasn't doing enough to surround them with talent. Now, imagine this scenario. Mitchell leaves for Golden State in 2026. Indiana scrambles to replace her production, but can't find anyone at her level. The team struggles to maintain their playoff positioning. Clark starts getting questions about whether she made the right choice staying in Indianapolis. How long before other teams start recruiting Clark directly? How long before she starts wondering if she needs a change of scenery to chase championships? Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, that's exactly the nightmare scenario that keeps Indiana executives awake at night. They know that losing Mitchell isn't just about losing one player. It's about sending a message to the rest of the league that Indianapolis can't keep elite talent happy. And once that perception takes hold, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The really terrifying part is how quickly this could all happen. Mitchell could announce her intentions in the offseason. By the time the 2026 season starts, the entire narrative around Indiana's championship window could have shifted. Instead of talking about Clark's supporting cast, we'd be talking about whether she needs to find a new team to maximize her prime years. So, what does Clark do in this situation? How does she handle the possibility that her preferred running mate might abandon ship for greener pastures? I've been reading the signals from Clark's recent interviews and social media activity, and there are subtle indicators that she's already thinking about contingency plans. The way she's been praising other teammates' contributions. The way she's been talking about roster flexibility and organizational vision. These aren't accidental word choices. Clark is smart enough to understand that publicly pressuring Mitchell to stay could backfire. But she's also competitive enough to start mentally preparing for different scenarios. And that preparation might be showing up in her approach to games and her interactions with teammates. Here's what I'm noticing. Clark has been more vocal about the team's championship potential this season, even when they've struggled with consistency. She's been talking about the organization's commitment to winning and the front office's willingness to make necessary moves. This sounds like a player who's trying to convince herself as much as anyone else that Indianapolis is the right place for her long term. But there's another interpretation of Clark's recent behavior that's more concerning: the increased recruitment of other players, the emphasis on team chemistry in interviews, the subtle criticisms of roster construction in media sessions. These could be signs of a player who's starting to take more control over personnel decisions, because she doesn't trust management to build properly around her. That level of involvement from a star player usually indicates declining confidence in organizational leadership. And if Clark is already feeling like she needs to drive roster decisions, how does she react when Mitchell potentially leaves despite her recruitment efforts? But let's zoom out and look at what this potential Mitchell departure means for the broader WNBA landscape. Because this isn't just about Indianapolis losing a player. It's about the league's most marketable star potentially learning that loyalty doesn't guarantee championship opportunities. I've been tracking expansion team strategies, and Golden State's approach is textbook poaching. They're not just building through the draft and free agency scraps. They're targeting established players from teams that might not be maximizing their championship windows. Mitchell fits that profile perfectly. If the Valkyries successfully recruit Mitchell away from a Clark-led team, it sends a message to every other star player in the league. Your franchise loyalty only matters until a better situation presents itself. And that could fundamentally change how superstars approach team building and career decisions. For Clark specifically, this becomes a case study in whether individual excellence can overcome organizational limitations. She's proven she can carry offensive systems and generate fan interest. But can she keep elite talent in a mid-market city when glamorous new franchises come calling with max offers and championship promises? The answer to that question will define not just Clark's career trajectory, but the entire competitive balance of the league. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, multiple executives around the league are watching the Mitchell situation closely. If Indiana can't retain their second-best player, it raises questions about every small market team's ability to build sustainable championship rosters. And that brings us to the most critical aspect of this entire situation: the championship timeline that's slipping away while Indiana figures out their roster construction. Clark is 23 years old and entering what should be the prime years of her career. In basketball terms, she has maybe a decade of elite performance ahead of her. But championship windows don't stay open for entire careers. They require perfect timing, organizational commitment, and a little bit of luck with injuries and roster chemistry. If Mitchell leaves and Indiana spends 2026 trying to rebuild their supporting cast, that's a year of Clark's prime essentially wasted. If the replacement players don't work out and they need another rebuild in 2027, that's 2 years gone. Before you know it, Clark is 26 or 27 and still waiting for management to surround her with championship-level talent. I've been analyzing championship construction timelines across professional sports, and the pattern is clear. Star players who don't win titles early in their primes often struggle to get back to that level later in their careers. Not because their individual performance declines, but because organizational dysfunction becomes harder to overcome as supporting players' age and salary cap constraints tighten. For Clark, the Mitchell decision represents a crossroads moment. If she can convince Mitchell to stay and they build championship chemistry together, the next few years could be magical. But if Mitchell leaves and Indiana struggles to replace her production, Clark might start questioning whether she needs to take more control over her career trajectory. The really concerning part is how quickly championship windows can close in the WNBA. With only 12 teams and limited roster spots, elite talent concentration matters more than in larger leagues. If Clark can't keep players like Mitchell in Indianapolis, how does she convince future free agents that the Fever are serious about winning? So what's fact and what's speculation? Let's break it down with complete transparency. Fact: Candace Parker has publicly predicted that Kelsey Mitchell will join Golden State in 2026 free agency. That's documented and verified. Fact: Indiana has tagged Mitchell as a priority re-sign and has cap space available for retention. That's confirmed through multiple sources. Fact: Mitchell's contract situation creates legitimate free agency questions that the organization will need to address. But the emotional impact on Clark? The organizational panic? The championship? Timeline concerns? That's where we're reading signals and connecting dots that aren't officially confirmed. Here's what I know from filtering through the digital breadcrumbs. This situation has everyone in Indianapolis nervous, from front office executives to coaching staff to players. The possibility of losing Mitchell isn't just a roster concern. It's an existential crisis for their championship aspirations. And for Clark, it represents the first real test of her ability to keep elite talent in a small market. The answer to that test could define the next phase of her career and determine whether Indianapolis becomes a championship destination or just another stop on the path to somewhere better. The really fascinating part is how this all plays out in real time. We're not talking about distant speculation. We're talking about decisions that could be made in the next few months, with consequences that will shape the league for years to come. That's the insider intelligence you won't get anywhere else. This isn't just about Kelsey Mitchell's contract negotiations. It's about Caitlin Clark's championship timeline, organizational competence, and the future of basketball in Indianapolis. What do you think happens next? Does Mitchell stay loyal to Clark and the Fever? Or does Golden State's pitch prove too tempting to resist? Drop your predictions in the comments, and let me know if you're seeing signals that I missed. If you want more insider breakdowns like this, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because while other channels chase surface-level drama, we're connecting the dots that actually matter for championship construction and superstar career trajectories. And make sure to share this breakdown with other Fever fans who need to understand what's really at stake in the Mitchell negotiations, because the decisions made in the next few months won't just impact one player. They'll determine whether Caitlin Clark gets the championship support she deserves or whether she starts looking for greener pastures herself. The clock is ticking, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Thanks for diving deep into the intelligence with me, and I'll see you in the next breakdown.